Hello and welcome back to another episode of Tim Unscripted. What I thought I might want to do this time around is run a bit of an experiment specifically around voice interactive AI. Now, I've got Perplexity, my favorite research tool, and one of the things that I wanted to do was see what Perplexity had to say about one of my favorite subjects and have a conversation with it. Hey, Perplexity, give me a history of vibe coding. And
Vibe coding began with...
hold on. Ask me questions about what my intent is so that you understand where this conversation might be going.
Got it. Are you looking for a general overview, a specific timeline, or how vibe coding might apply to your own work?
I'm looking for a general overview at this point.
Vibe coding emerged as AI-assisted coding started with GitHub Copilot in 2021, expanded with ChatGPT in 2022, and evolved into powerful AI coding agents by 2025. It's essentially about building software by guiding AI tools through natural language and creative intent, rather than writing every line of code yourself.
Okay, so break this down for me. Does that involve detailed structure as well?
Yes, vibe coding still involves detailed structure. The AI helps draft the underlying code while you guide architecture, logic, and design. You still set requirements and review the output, but the heavy lifting is handled by AI.
Okay, let's dig into the requirements piece because I think that might be something that's missing in the vibe coding conversation. Explain that to me.
In vibe coding, you still define clear requirements like features, constraints, and architecture up front, but you communicate them to the AI in natural language instead of code. The AI generates structured code based on those requirements, and you review and refine as needed, much like a collaborative coding partner.
Okay, so how does that look different than, say, spec-driven development?
Spec-driven development relies on formal specs that are manually translated into code, while vibe coding uses conversational input to guide an AI to generate that code. You interact more fluidly with the AI, iterating quickly, rather than strictly following a pre-written specification.
Okay, but I could see how somebody who doesn't have a background in software development might get confused about vibe coding with intent versus having a degree of structure and organization around what they're trying to achieve. Is there a balance between vibe coding and spec-driven development that people should consider?
Yes, many teams use vibe coding to quickly prototype while still keeping lightweight specs to maintain structure. This balance lets you harness AI speed while staying aligned with your project goals.
Okay, let's walk through a scenario because I really want to understand what that might look like from a simulation standpoint. So give me a couple of scenarios where that might play out.
One scenario is building a simple web app. You tell the AI you need a to-do list with user login, and it generates the code while you refine details like database choice. Another is an internal tool. You specify key functions and workflows, and the AI drafts most of the code while you ensure it fits your organization standards.
Okay, now you just mentioned organization standards. That might be a critical piece that's missing in all of this conversation. Break that down for me.
Organizational standards mean you set coding guidelines, security practices, and design patterns that the AI follows when generating code. With vibe coding, you still enforce these standards by reviewing AI output and guiding it to meet those criteria.
Okay, for people who are just getting into this, break down coding guidelines, security practices, and design patterns, because I think those are missing ingredients as well.
Coding guidelines are rules for code style and readability. Security practices cover things like data protection and safe authentication, and design patterns are proven ways to structure software components. These help ensure that AI-generated code is consistent, secure, and maintainable.
Okay, now for people who are not familiar with frameworks, help me understand and help them understand how frameworks might help if they're getting into vibe coding.
Frameworks give you a solid foundation of pre-built components and best practices, so the AI can generate code that slots into a tested structure. This makes the output more reliable and easier to maintain.
Okay, so for instance, what frameworks might one consider if they're starting to vibe code, and how would they express the use of a framework?
Popular frameworks mentioned for vibe coding include React for front-end, Next.js for full-stack web apps, and Django or Flask for Python-based backend work. You tell the AI to build using a specific framework, and it generates code that fits that framework's conventions and structure.
Okay, you've mentioned several languages here. For somebody who's just getting into this, what would be good entry point languages that are human readable so that they could review the code, but are not so complicated that they can't understand what's being generated?
Python and JavaScript are great starting points. They're readable, widely used, and work well with most AI coding tools. They let beginners understand the generated code while building useful projects.
All right, so I'm going to flip this a little bit because this really matters. When vibe coding first came out, was test-driven development part of that consideration? Because I know that's a concept that's been around for a number of years, but I'm not sure if it's been really captured in the spirit of vibe coding.
Test-driven development wasn't central to vibe coding at first, but many teams now integrate automated tests to ensure AI-generated code is reliable. You can prompt the AI to create tests alongside the code to keep quality in check.
Well, that almost flies in the face of vibe coding, don't you think? Because test-driven development is about writing tests before the code is even written.
It can seem that way, but you can still outline tests in natural language first and have the AI generate them before coding. That way, vibe coding can still follow the spirit of test-driven development, just with a conversational approach.
Okay, so help me understand how that might look, because I'm familiar with the given when then framework. Wow, something just went really wrong. I'm going to put this on pause and try to get back into that conversation. All right, well, in spite of my best effort to get back into that interactive conversation, the best I can do is go dictate to text, which is not going to be nearly as fun for a video. But I think you get the gist of where I'm going with this comparison between vibe coding, traditional software development, and spec-driven development, which is kind of my preferred route. What I wanted you to take away from this video is the fact that there's definitely no right answer and there's no wrong answer. I tend to lean towards a more structured approach, not that anything in vibe coding, aside from making what I would consider informed choices up front, it should dissuade you from pursuing vibe coding. I want you to be inspired by the idea that you can start working on a project, and especially a proof of concept, using vibe coding as your way of working, but understand that some of the foundational and principal approaches still matter, even though you may be doing things a little bit differently when it comes to your interaction in an integrated development environment where you've got an agent like GitHub Copilot running or something of the like. Think like an engineer. Think like a problem solver. Give yourself the latitude and the leeway in approaching vibe coding from the standpoint that there's got to be a degree of rigor that enables, we'll say, generally accepted practices to go into place. If this appeals to you, then there's more videos out there specifically on this subject. And as well, there are platforms. The platforms are a space where I'm not fully on board. And I have videos that clearly state that. But it might be a good starting point for you to be able to understand how this might work fundamentally for you. But more importantly, how this works from the standpoint of getting some sort of prototype out into the marketplace to prove or disprove whether or not a piece of software or a small minimum viable product might work in the marketplace to get fast feedback and then scale into more formal software development approach. The worst thing that you could do, in my opinion, is to build out an entire app on one of these platforms. Bring somebody in who is, a bit further down the road in their engineering, software engineering experience, and go, here you go. Can you support this? That might be unfair to them, and it certainly could be unfair to you from the standpoint that there's a lot more to unpack in this concept of vibe coding. And I'll try to explore that in future episodes. And think of it this way. As a leader, would you incur the risk that vibe coding brings without putting, we'll say, the guardrails around how that might look for you, your team, your organization? If it's just you as a solopreneur doing the startup thing, it may be easier to manage that risk. But understand, you're going to reach a technical limitation, and I don't want you to be unaware of what that might look like for you. Thanks for watching another episode of Tim Unscripted. Talk to you soon.